All right, picture this. You show up for class, ready to roll, but that Wi-Fi has got that spinning wheel of doom. Nothing's working. You manage to finally get onto your cloud, into the Google Drive, and you find where the file should be, but you can't find any of the material that you need for your class. Vanished, poof, gone into thin air. And your last class ran over a little bit. The admin caught you on your lunch break, so you didn't really have time to prep for anything else. And now you're standing there in front of 6 students or so, and you've got nothing. Zip, zilch, nada. And they're staring at you. So you've got no slides, no handouts, no activities, no magic bag of props. And you got 60 minutes. This isn't a hypothetical horror story. This actually happened to me quite a few times when I was working in schools and doing all that good stuff. More times than I would like to count. And here's the twist. Those lessons sometimes ended up being some of the best, most productive lessons for myself and for my students. Better than some of the ones that I had spent hours planning. So today we're going to talk about survival mode teaching and how that 1 hour can actually count for something without losing your cool and without a big bag of tricks. Hey there, it's Kelly, and if you're here for miracle fixes, shiny classroom hacks, or whatever today's buzzword is trending, yeah, not gonna happen. What you will get is real talk about English teaching, teacher training, and the chaos we actually deal with in ELT. So let's get into it. All right, I'm going to try and stay on track again, trying to be slightly more professional, slightly, but I've got some anecdotes and I've got some stuff to tell you, some tips and tricks. So first things first, I know the panic of going into a classroom and then realizing, oh, what am I going to do? And that creeping feeling in your chest, like, oh no, they're going to think that I'm unprepared, that I don't really care, that I'm not really that professional. But here's the truth. Most students don't actually care if your slide deck is beautiful and perfect and all of the little bells and whistles that you tinker with in your spare time work flawlessly. They actually care if the lesson feels relevant, engaging, and alive. And by alive, I mean human, not something that comes from AI, meaning it's not delivered by AI, it's delivered by a human. Great. So sometimes you just have to strip away the extras and you can actually listen to your students more because you're not responding robotically. You're just responding naturally, and the class becomes less about going through the plan step by step, stage by stage. Though I love planning, but sometimes people get so wrapped up in that. And it's more about like, what's happening? What's happening in this class? What are students doing? So sometimes all teachers need to have that little bit of panic that they don't have anything ready so that they can actually get back to what teaching is. This is just my opinion. Who am I? So that's the magic of zero materials teaching. It forces you to be present. It forces you to build up what you've got, work with what you've got, and know what to work with and what to kind of discard and deliver something that's meaningful every single time. How do I get through this? Well, after years in the industry, here's my steps. Step 1, start with a question that matters. Forget about the how are you, forget about what'd you do this weekend. It just looks like you're stalling. So always have some things in your back pocket when you've got to go to like a no materials type of situation for whatever reason. If it's because you're purposely doing it, it's because the universe is conspiring against you and bad things happen to good people and then you've got to figure it out. Or, you know, the students seem like they're on autopilot and so we've got to shake them up a little bit. Whatever the reason behind going no materials, here's how I would do it. You got to have a spark to start things off. Because if you don't have a spark, it's not going to go over well. So something that gets their brains going, emotions engaged, people got to get to talking because at the end of the day, you're teaching a language. The purpose of using a language, communication. So I tend to ask things like, here's a couple that I usually, not exactly these, but like versions of these, something in this wheelhouse. What's the one thing you wish more people understood about you, about your job, about your country, about whatever? Fill in the blank. What's the most difficult conversation you've ever had? At work, with family, in English, abroad? I don't know. Pick a scenario, or don't. Just leave it open to the most challenging conversation they've ever had. Or something along the lines of, what's one thing that you've thought about for a long time changing and either haven't gotten around to it yet or are going to change next week, or one thing you thought about changing and then thank goodness you didn't. So those types of things. These work, obviously variations of these, and not only these three, I'm just trying to give you some examples, because it's what matters to them, the students. And they open the door to some authentic language, real experiences, natural engagement, good conversations. The bonus part is you instantly get an insight into, well, not only a little bit of their lives, but also vocabulary gaps, grammar habits, good, bad, or otherwise, and even some cultural perspectives if you're teaching people who are not from your same culture. And this happens all before you've quote unquote taught anything. So great. Next thing you got to do, step 2, is to build language from the conversation. So you've got them talking, got them engaged, hopefully whatever topic you picked, whatever questions you asked, maybe you have to ask a couple questions before they kind of really dig in. This is the magic trick, pay attention. You got to start building your mini lesson in your head around what's already happening in class. All right, well, here's the direction we're going to go. So as they talk, you got to listen for patterns. Is there one that's struggling a bit more to form like polite disagreement, for example? Or is there a great phrase that keeps popping up that's worth repeating and throwing on the board? Or is there something linguistic happening here that we should go over, that we should review, something, right? But this is all you. So here's what you got to do. And here's here, you don't have to. Here's what I typically do. I recast mistakes gently to kind of remind them. They get real excited, right? So we have to remind them that this is actually a language class as well. And because it's a language class as well, we have to focus not only on getting the story out there, but also getting the language in an appropriate way. Then we've got to highlight some of those great phrases. Yeah. We got to point these things out. When people do things well, like let's give them props where props are due. You know what I mean? Like throw it up on the board, do whatever you need to do. And write key language on the board as it comes up. Now, I have kind of my go-to, my God, what is the scenario? Like everything's off kilter right now. It's bothering me. Okay. I have my go-to board setup that is like, how can I describe this to you? Well, here's how it goes. I throw always, for whatever reason, I can't tell you why, it's on the left-hand side. I'm kind of visualizing it here on my screen right now. On the left-hand side of my screen, I always have a column of emergent language. I don't know why, it makes sense to me, left to right, that's how I read, so whatever. Then on the rest of it, I kind of break it into 2 boxes. Top box, I always put things that the students are doing well, interesting language, stuff that they used, maybe that they were struggling with and now are using properly. Hydration is always important. Be sure to hydrate. All sorts of stuff that's positive examples of language on the top. And then on the bottom, I put stuff that we need to work on, we need to look at, maybe what's going to be the focal point of this lesson. That's how I do it. I do it both in the virtual world, when I'm teaching face-to-face, I kind of have, it's just like the setup that makes sense to my brain. My students are used to it. They just roll with it. So after you do this, because they've been giving you input, you've been taking notes, you go through a bunch of stuff, and then you say, okay, to yourself, now I've got the lesson. It's based entirely on their needs. It's based entirely on real-time language that they were producing. It's custom built because, hey, we were making it up as we go. Not like making, you know what I mean? And no, there's no pre-made worksheets. It's completely in the wheelhouse of the students and it's relevant to them. So then we move on to stage 3. We get one idea and we break it into 3 micro tasks. This is what I do. You got to stretch that initial conversation. So whatever spark you had, which turned into language production that you're going to work with, now you got to convert that conversation into something that they can actually practice. So here's the formula. I take one core idea from the discussion, like whatever was happening there, a scenario, a situation, and I try to think of the task, and then I break it into 3 mini tasks. So here's, if I had, how can I explain this a little bit better? That was super vague, sorry. So if a person is complaining about work relationships and talking about all the fights that they've been having, actually this has been happening recently with a student that I have a class with in a couple hours. Hang on, let me not go too close so it's not yeah, okay, there we go. So he's been not fighting, I don't want to say fighting, but fighting with some departments in his company. And so every time I talk to him, it's always like, well, another day, another fight type of deal. So he usually tells me about what's going on there. And I've done this with him. I think I did this with him one time, this type of no materials, but I did a no materials lesson on purpose. And what happened was he was telling me about the disagreements that he's getting into and how it's kind of like a struggle for power with like the leaders of the different country divisions. It's a mess. It's a bit of a mess, to be honest. So he tells me about that. It's like, okay, so how do we deal with this and how do we improve his language so that he can perform better in these scenarios? So I thought to myself, well, let's have a scenario where I take on the personality of the confrontational and antagonistic personality that he's having to deal with, and then we can kind of go through this. So here's the example. He's always got to push back in meetings because this one person is not helpful, but they're also not taking responsibility for something that's their responsibility. So he's got to push back in a very politically correct way and be nice about it. So how do I take that conversation of him kind of having a mini therapy session complaining and then turn it into tasks after I give him feedback on his language? Well, I then have him write a couple, 1 to 3 soft disagreement sentences, ways to disagree, but that aren't abrasive, are not going to get him in trouble, are not going to get him on the shit list of the other company, the country presidents, because he's dealing with like multiple country presidents. So it's just, like how do we soften the blow of this complaint here and push back nicely? Then after he's got those written down, we firm them up a little bit, practice saying them with different tones, different emphasis. We kind of play around with delivery and how people are going to take it, talking about also discussing the cultural implications of this too. Then we go into like a mock scenario, role playing, quick scenario of a few things that this person has been doing. I'm very well read into these problems at this point because it's been going on for like a year or so. So I can easily take on that personality and kind of role play through these things. And he gets the chance to try it out in practice. So one topic, 0 materials, full engagement. You're giving them a chance to use the language in different contexts. Like I can change the context very easily. I can respond differently. And then he kind of has to react naturally. And we're not wasting time on a 6-page handout or a pre-planned script thing or like me trying to follow the steps of a lesson plan. It's just there. This is what's happening in his life. So, hey, cool. Let's deal with that. Then after that, step 4, trying to stay on focus. I got lots of examples of this, so I'm going to try not to go off on all of those examples. But step 4 is end, and always end with a reflection. I tend to do this with my students, if not every class, the majority of their classes, because, or I kind of mix it into their lessons too. They have to reflect. So this is the moment where they make meaning out of whatever we've just done. And it could be as easy as asking them questions. You don't have to make, again, a mountain out of a molehill here. It's like, what felt useful today? What's one phrase that you want to keep using? What surprised you about how you reacted or handled a certain scenario while we were doing the activity, doing the task? And these moments of self-assessment turn this kind of quote unquote filler lesson that, oh, you know, if you have no materials or anything like that, it's not going to be a very relevant lesson. It's just going to be a filler. No, it turns it into quite a powerful one, because their reflection helps them remember, first of all. And it also shows you what landed and what didn't land. So then you can start customizing future lessons based off of that. So here is this was my personal story that I was supposed to share with you according to my notes, but whatever, here we go. I'm a sharer. Okay. So I was meant to teach this group of advanced business English students in this co-working space. And when I got there, of course, you know, just to make it more convenient for everyone, the Wi-Fi was down across the whole building. Like nothing was working. And they're like, we're sorry that, you know, they were calling the company, but we live in Brazil. So read into that exactly the sarcasm that I laid across that. My slide deck was on a cloud, but I anticipated a co-working space to have Wi-Fi. So I didn't have it on my phone or, you know, my laptop or anything like that. Inaccessible. And there was this cafe next door. It was so loud. I just remember the music was so loud. We actually went in there afterwards and had a meal, and it was so loud. We had to sit outside. It was just really bad. They were blaring music. We could just not, you know, the places where you go. This is a PSA, I think, like public service announcement for restaurants during the day, that you're not a bar or anything like that. If you've got live music during the day, usually people want to have a conversation. So play the music by all means. But if it's, you know, the weekend, we don't want it to be blasted. Anyways, don't blast music. People go to restaurants to usually interact with each other, sometimes to see the music. But like if they're wanting like a rock show, they're going to go to a bar late at night, or they're going to go to a concert, like not to a restaurant. Calm down with the speakers. It's too much. Anyways. So back to my lesson. Ditch the plan, ask the group what was the most awkward work situation you've ever had, because right then and there I was living my awkward work situation. So I felt like they could relate a little bit because I was just struggling. Yeah. Just struggling through. So the story started coming out, which was great. It was teaching gold. My dog's going to bark because she's being a jerk right now. And she knows that I have sound issues, but it's fine. We'll just be overstimulated throughout this entire podcast. So then we built the entire lesson around this kind of tactful disagreement, clarifying misunderstandings, tone of voice, trying to pacify tense situations, etc., etc. And we pulled it all from their examples. They were talking a lot about work. They were talking some about personal stories. And to this day, those students remember that class. One, because it was quite unusual, but two, not because I had a brilliant PDF and like the most, no, because it was real. It was theirs. It made sense to them. And we did what we needed to do. And they walked away with some great language, feedback, practice, everything. So here's a takeaway. Zero materials doesn't mean zero value. I'm going to go into a whole dog me rant in another episode because I think that Scott Thornberry and Luke Meddings, when they created that dog me method, or not, I don't even, whatever we want to call it nowadays, it's been completely bastardized from the original idea of materials light and that lazy teachers have latched onto it and said, this is amazing. This is my whole identity is dog me. And it's like, okay, yeah, I get it. But you also can't just stroll into classes and not have anything ready or prepared. You got to have a direction, because at the end of it, well, okay. Getting back to it, zero materials isn't zero value. I'll go on that rant on another episode, but I think that Scott Thornberry and Luke Meddings have had a huge disservice to them with people who have propped up the way that they've interpreted using TalkMe instead of the way that I think that they probably intended for it to be used. Anyways, so if you can start with a question that matters, something that sparks conversation, something that's really interesting, something that's emotional, build language from what's already there, turn one idea or one scenario into 3 microtasks, and then end with a reflection. I think that you can walk into any room under any circumstances and make an impact in 60 minutes. It's not always about having all of the materials and all of the tools. It's about being the tool. Your ears, your voice, your instincts. And honestly, some of the best lessons that might happen are on the days that you least expect it. That's it for today. If you want more, I've got binge-worthy playlists right here on the channel. You can also grab some resources at kellypenningtonelt.com, Instagram at kellypenningtonelt, and yes, even LinkedIn, where I do my best impression of being professional. Links below. See you in the next one.